Small. So we are on our last night, and it's things you got to know when coming out later in life. And we are going to be talking about joy and community tonight, but we are going to talk a little bit about grief because the emotional ups and downs of coming out later in life are pretty intense, and a lot of times people have never experienced anything like that, and so we just want to talk about it for a little bit. And I'm going to go through all our slides again. And we are going to focus a little bit on this joy of coming out later in life and how it really does change things. And so we are really excited to talk about this, that we're so excited about this, that by the end of this meeting, you will be running down the highway running with with the rainbow flag. So when you'll just leave your seat and go running down the highway when we get all done with this. So we've helped thousands of folks. Barb and I've been doing this for a while. These are some of the people that I have worked with and have come to my retreats. And these are some of the testimonials. I have a ton on my website if you want to read more of what it's like to work with me. And whoops, which way am I going? Going the wrong way. Sorry about that, folks. And this is who I am personally, and this is who I am professionally, and this is our dear Barbara personally, and this is who she is professionally. So what we want to talk tonight about is grief for a little bit, because I just want to validate a lot of the feelings that people experience when they come out later in life. And, there's this nice little grief stages of grief thing. And, we get shock, and then we do go denial, and then anger, and then, then we have some guilt, and then and then it's all done. And grief isn't like that. I like my experience on the right-hand side. I think that is a much more accurate picture of grief. And I have found my definition of grief, and I'm a grief counselor. I was certified by the Miss Foundation. They work with people who've lost children. I got a certification in this about 10 years ago already. My interest in grief grew through working in hospice. And so my definition of grief, it is our emotional, physical, spiritual, and intellectual response to loss. And coming out later in life does have some loss with it. And I think we've talked a little bit about it here in this group. When we've been talking about like catalyst relationships, first breakups, when we have talked about possibly getting divorced, when we realize that we're queer and we've got to do something about it, we want to do something about it. And so we have already talked a little bit about the loss of coming out later in life. And so I want to talk a little bit about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So she wrote about the 5 stages of grief. And she's like the grandmother of like educational stuff about grief. She did her work in the 1960s, and she actually did it on people who were dying. And what they did is they took what she said about grief and loss on people who were dying and placed it directly on people who were grieving a loss of someone. And it really doesn't work this way so much with like in typical grief, because typical grief is sort of all over the place, and there's no linear, it's not linear at all. You can feel good for a couple of days, then you go back, and it's a very, very fluid process with ups and downs, twists and turns. But I have found that Kubler-Ross cycle of grief really fits our community of women coming out later in life, because we go through denial, we experience anger, we experience sadness and depression, and we experience bargaining, and we also experience acceptance. And one of the reasons why I love it so much is because, she was working with people who were dying, and we're not dying by any stretch of the imagination, but we are dying to the sense of self, of who we thought we were, who we thought we were supposed to be. And so that's why I like Kubler-Ross so much. Um, she also is I also want to give you an example. So I have seen it really in bargaining, and this is how I see bargaining, is that a lot of times couples will realize that, the wife or the husband is queer or gay or lesbian. And they're like trying to figure out how they can maintain everything and stay together because of the beliefs they have around divorce. And so a lot of times couples try to open up their marriages. A lot of times husbands will say, well, you can go and experiment with a woman or go have a girlfriend. But inherently, that's pretty patriarchal, because I can almost guarantee you no husband would say to you, oh, well, you can go and experience something with another man. They say the other woman because inherently, a lot of times men don't value women as much as they do men. And if your wife is not straight and she starts to be with a woman, she is most likely not going to stay married to you, to marry to a man. And so I have seen couples open up their marriages and also try to practice polyamory. And I find that that is almost like I think of it as a bargaining stage. I find that people do it for a couple years, and then at one point, one person in the couple will move on because they just don't want to have an open relationship anymore. Um, and so, and I've talked to polyamory experts, and they say that, like, within the straight community, a lot of times couples will, say, oh, maybe we should start practicing polyamory, and nobody's gay. They're just going to practice polyamory. And she says, a lot of times that doesn't work because couples are bargaining to try to save a marriage somehow. And I just want to say, and inherently, once when somebody tells a spouse that they're not straight, the marriage is already changed, because there's a piece of information that nobody knew or knew about before. I mean, you may have known about it, but your spouse didn't know about it. Your children didn't know about it. When there is now a new piece of information that everybody is pretty much aware of. I just want to validate all of you that it does feel like a tornado sometimes, the emotions, especially if before you came out, you're not somebody who has really, like, you don't like emotions and you don't really want to feel them and stuff like that. And so a lot of times when people come out later in life, there is a lot of turbulence around emotions. Barb, can you add to that at all?
For sure. I think, especially if someone has is questioning their sexuality, has been married for a long time. Um, it's This is a group of people who are very good at anesthetizing their emotions and
Mhm.
having not a really great sense of self. And for me, one way that appeared was that, I was able to divert my attention during my married life with a lot of creative pursuits. I
Mhm.
tell you, the amount of money I've spent at the craft store, like Michael's is full of women who are like, pushing down those feelings and distracting with something that is like creatively, emotionally, intellectually stimulating. Um, because we're, able to create something and have, a really great distraction. In fact, so many of our late in lifers are such intelligent people, right? Like
Mhm,
they're really interesting, educated, women who dive into pursuits. And I
mhm,
think part of that is avoidance. So when you start to actually confront, um, I think it can feel very overwhelming
mhm,
when you stop using those devices
mhm, mhm.
to
Well,
avoid, or to
yeah,
confront.
and
It's
yeah,
tough.
I mean, if you think about your catalyst relationship, I mean, it was so intense and you've never experienced anything like that before. And then you said like everything just went by the wayside because you were so in love with this person for a short time. And everything
For
and like
sure.
and so the but then and then when the relationship ended, you were left with all these emotions and
Mhm.
and you realized that Michael's wasn't going to do it anymore.
No, there was no way, and you're absolutely right. Like the intensity of the emotions was both thrilling and scary, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, for somebody who, yeah, just pushed real feelings, and also kind of, I think, developed a feeling that, like, my feelings were not important.
Hmm.
I minimized I minimized my own feelings because they weren't being met in relationship with my husband.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, um,
Well, it was easier to minimize them than trying to have them met.
yeah, so like things like, every single anniversary, birthdays, Valentine's Day, like we never did anything for special for each other. There was no like special gifts or like bouquets of flowers, and we also always just said, we're not the couple who does that. We don't need that to express our love and affection for each other. We don't need to spend money. We don't need these kinds of gestures. Well, in fact, you know what? Stuff like that is really important in relationship.
Mhm.
And depending on what your love language is, but yeah, so I did a great job of minimizing my own feelings about it to sort of avoid disappointment. But let me tell you that minimizing your own feelings does not minimize disappointment
Mhm.
at all. And Brene Brown talks about that. She talks a lot about that. It's like, just feel the feels,
Mhm. Mhm.
because trying to avoid the feels does not make pain lessen later on.
Mhm. Mhm. So, on one hand, you may be holding all this grief, but then on the other hand, you're holding just such tremendous joy of self discovery. Some of us fall in love for the first time in a real way. Some of us find community in friends and we feel seen for the first time. So, there is a lot of joy within the queer community. We're going to talk a little bit about this. I don't know how I got back to here. My computer is not behaving tonight, folks. I am so sorry about that. I have no idea how that happened, but ah. So developing relationships with somebody that is um, is really wonderful. But Barb and I really believe that finding community, finding other people who think like you, who have some of the same experiences of you as you do, is just as important as dating and finding a girlfriend. And I would argue finding community before you find a girlfriend is actually probably really helpful for all of us because if they will celebrate the relationship with you. They will be super happy when you meet somebody that you like, And if the relationship goes a little south, they will be your biggest supporters to help you go through that. So, Barb and I are going to talk a little bit about why you should come out. First of all, the first one is you really will find a supportive community. Occasionally, you may meet a gatekeeper, and I just want you to know that they exist, and they may say, "Oh, you can't be lesbian or you can't be queer because you've been with a man or something." That seems to be getting less and less, isn't it, Barb? I just don't see that as much anymore.
Yeah, I mean, for every gatekeeper I've met, I've probably met like
A
10
thousand people that,
affirming people
yeah.
who've like they exist and make me scratch my head when I run into them. But in fact, there are so many long out lesbians who are very, very
Thrilled
accepting.
to have
They're
you.
thrilled. Yes. Come on over. Come on over to our side.
My wife said I never could understand why somebody would put somebody down because they think they might be gay and they've been married to a man. She goes, "There's so few of us. It is so nice to have new members in the community." So she was like, she could like, I was the first person that she ever dated that came out later in life, and had children, by the way. But like she had no prejudice against that at all. Like that's just not her operating system. Now, there are people that are gatekeepers, and I just want to remind y'all, if you run into one, you can say to yourself, "Oh, you're a gatekeeper. Anne Marie and Barb warned me about you, and I'm gonna ignore you." and and just go on your way, because the only person that can name your sexuality is you, and not the lesbian at the end of the bar. The only person that can do it is you. Barb, you want to take the next one?
For sure. And I just want to say also, like, in response to Casey here in your comment about, yeah, the gay men also can't tell you who you are. So
True.
if I were going to come up with a good lighthearted response, I would say something like, I'm as gay as a spring day, or gay as the French horn, or whatever. But as far as the next point here about feeling more authentic, well, I mean, absolutely the burden of having to, once the burden of concealing is released and you can sort of push past that veil, it's such a like liberty, I think, is the best word that I can use to describe that feeling. And it is so exhausting to live as like outwardly as a version of yourself that isn't true to who you are. And in fact, there's like, it's just science. Folks who remain closeted often become like, they experience more things like migraines, gastrointestinal upset, other kinds of like sort of mysterious, hard to pin down pain. And it's because the stuff in the conflict in our mind is manifesting in our bodies, right?
Mhm.
So by coming out, you relieve the pressure, and it's like it's literally like becoming lighter, walking lighter in your own, you know, in your own footsteps. It's I don't know. I don't know. What's a other than liberty? I don't know a better word to describe it. What do you think, Emery?
Um, I like the word liberty. I think I used another one. I can't remember. It might come to me right now, but it is feeling there liberation. I didn't use liberty. I used liberation,
Hmm.
because it did feel like liberation when I finally came out. Uh,
Hmm.
you'll inspire others. Honestly, by coming out later in life, you show others that it's never too late to be true to yourself. And, it's not just people that are gay. It's also people that want to make changes in their life when they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And they see you do something and they're like, this person can do this, then well, maybe I can do this too, And so it really does inspire others to live authentically. And also, I think it inspires um, like Gen Zs right now, there's I think 30% identify as LGBTQ. And the thing is
Hmm.
that when they see queer couples, when they see, like my wife and I get a lot of love when we Barb laughs about it because when my wife shows up on TikToks, my viewership goes up because people love to see a happy couple
Yes.
on the screen, and they love seeing a happy lesbian couple. Oh, and it's a happy lesbian couple that is in their early 60s. So like like people really like that. And so showing up, you may inspire somebody else. And then
Hmm.
our relationships become more filling and
Hmm.
fulfilling. Barb, and do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when we start showing up in relationships, whether that's like, romantic relationships, friendships, family relationships, as a more authentic version of ourselves, and I know authenticity is sort of like the buzzword that we throw around, but I can't think of a better word to describe it. It makes the connections that we have with others far more real and honest, and that honesty fosters trust and connection.
Mhm,
So it improves. I can't think of a relationship other than maybe with my ex-husband that wasn't improved by
mhm,
my coming out.
mhm,
I
mhm,
think virtually every relationship that I had
mhm,
improved with my coming out, and that's because um, I was being more honest, and I was being perceived as being more honest, and that fostered better communication and strengthened those relationships.
mhm. And also too, you become a part of a culture and a movement, because it is a vibrant culture. And
Hmm.
sometimes when you're living your straight life, you don't realize how vibrant the culture is. And I love this picture here. That was a group of women who came to Nashville and we went to Pride in the pouring rain. That's why we all look like drowned rats. um, but we had a wonderful time with all of them, and I'm still in touch with most of them now. So beyond and also we form our own communities, like as we become friends with people, as we get to know people. If you join Lotus Group Coaching, like these women did, you will have a group of people that will be your people and who will understand what it's like to not only be queer, but to come out later in this life as well. And you know
Hmm.
what? We need more people to fight, frankly.
Hmm.
So as you guys know, the queer community, the LGBT community has more legislation against them than I just don't understand it. I mean, I get my brain does not work that way. But there has, and of course, I mean, there's a lot of news recently about the poor non-binary necks from Oklahoma. They were killed. They died after a savage beating in a bathroom at a school, and there's so many things wrong with that story, what happened. And we need people that can fight and fight for our kids and fight for ourselves and fight for our rights. And
Hmm.
that doesn't happen the first couple of years. But as you become more comfortable in your skin, as we become more comfortable with who we are, and have a bigger community, that ends up, you become like, remember that comfort zone thing? It's at the end when you're using your experiences to help others. And so maybe showing up at your state capitol to fight a bill, maybe going to a march to protest something, maybe becoming an advocate for the trans community. Any of those things can be really, really important. And
Hmm.
Barb, can you talk about the last one?
Sure. And I just sort of say, like, I'm actually, that last point that you made, I'm actually like writing a paper right now where one of the statistics is that people in the queer community have higher cultural and emotional intelligence.
Mhm,
And that is, you know, a byproduct of being part of a marginalized community. And so when we work towards these things that are to the common good, and I'm sure a lot of you folks are have volunteered in some capacity in your life somewhere, you can speak to the richness that brings to the meaning of your own lives. And that richness is, I mean, it's what gives you meaning. It makes you happier. It's gives you a sense of greater purpose beyond yourself, and of being in service to the community, of modeling these behaviors. I think it's a way to not only put some good out in the world, but to make you far more content within yourself, and full of gratitude.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The greatest gift you can give to others is the gift of unconditional love and acceptance. And I think one of the most wonderful things that Barb and I see all the time with the women we work with is the love and acceptance, like the just love and acceptance by others whose stories are similar to our own, um, that await you when you come out, or rather let in, as we prefer to call it. But I see that love and acceptance in the non judgmental presence time and time again with people who have walked this path and maybe a little further head down the road than you, but they certainly understand. So, we want to talk about how to find community. Um, there are lots of different ways. And so we have this lovely little graphic. And so you may want to screenshot it right now because it really depends on what you like to do. If you're an artsy fartsy kind of person, you all know there's lots of gays in the arts. So, finding an art group, a community theater, a choir, or band, or something like that, and joining that. Barb and I always really recommend go where your interests are. So if you're not a sports person, don't join a softball team because you won't enjoy it. But if you are somebody who really loves sports, any of them, and we don't have mine on here, Barb, my pickleball and kayaking, we got to add those. So if
Those
you,
are very gay activities. Absolutely,
I
they need to go
know.
on the list.
And so, I love to I do those things. My wife and I are huge kayakers. We have our own, we go all over the state of Tennessee. We also play pickleball with, we have they're all lesbians. They're all our friends. And we play pickleball with them every weekend or sometimes during the week. If you are an activist and you really like to help other people and you like to volunteer for larger organizations, there's the ClearLink Community Center guide, so you can find a queer community center near you. There's the Human Rights Campaign, which does a lot of advocating for the queer community around legislation and around rights. There's parents, PFLAG, which is the parents of and friends of lesbian and gays. That is a very old organization, started in 1970 when it was still shameful for you to have a queer child. And it was started by a mom who wasn't going to be ashamed of her queer son, her gay son. There's lots of places on Facebook. A lot of you are in my Facebook group and you met me through there. There's Facebook, Reddit, Discord, Meetup. There is a huge lesbian contingent on TikTok, right, Barb? There is.
There's
You're
so many
right.
lesbians on TikTok, and later in life lesbians too. Like
Yeah, a
so
lot of
many,
it,
so many.
yeah, there's a lot. And there's actually, what your feed is. My feed is I have therapists, lesbian creators, and politics. So that's on my feed. Tana gets a lot of, my wife gets a lot of squirrels and goats and stuff like that. And then if you're like the other, like if you're a video gamer, if you're a gamer, there are queer gaming communities. If you like to travel, there are some really great, I belong to Queer and Lesbian Travel on Facebook. It's a great group because, like, my wife and I are going to Palm Springs in a couple of weeks. And I was like, okay, where do we go? And like, I had 50 women that lived in that area telling me what was going on. And I found out that there was a tea dance on Sunday when we were going to be there. And if y'all don't know what a tea dance is a dance for queer women, lesbian women, trans women that happens in the afternoon at tea time between 3 and 7, and they are usually so much fun. And you go out to dinner and you're in bed by 9. It's the best
Oh
thing.
my God, this sounds like it's perfectly engineered for me.
um, so there is so many different ways to find community, and I really, really like, if you are just starting out on this journey, I would really, Barb, can you stop recording? If you are starting out on this journey and you like,